You are listening to a podcast from Essendon Presbyterian Church in Melbourne, recorded 6 p.m. on March 23, 2024. Presented by Dr. Tars Walker.
And it's good to see you, and we're going to talk about something called, is it going to work? You're talking about something called the rocks, the fossils, and the age of the earth. And that's not coming up yet, but it will come up eventually. So I've got some pictures to show you. It's interesting, rocks, fossils, and the age of the earth. You'd wonder what it's got to do to be connected with a church, don't you? Well, you'll find out tonight. It's very central to the way everything works. And it's very central to the authority of the Bible. It's very central to the gospel. And yet it seems so strange that it's like that. So we'll get the picture up. There we go. Well, we're not talking about that. That is one of the... Here we go, rocks, fossils, and the age of the earth. Now, I wonder if you can guess where I'm standing. I'm at a particular place, a very famous place, and my wife and I went there a number of years ago, and I wonder if you can tell me where it is. Does anybody know where it could be? America? No, well, America, not USA, but it's where?
Richmond.
Hey?
Richmond, Queensland.
No, it's not Richmond, Queensland. Has anybody else got an idea? Hey? Drumheller. You people are very sharp. Drumheller, it is. And just as a second lead-up question, I wonder if anybody can give me, would have a clue or could give me a suggestion about what Drumheller is famous for. Wow, that is very good. Very good. They're famous for dinosaurs, and that's me. In a rather cool weather, just as we're coming into Drumheller, and there's a welcome sign, dinosaurs. I asked one audience once, a congregation, what they're famous for, and they said, 2 pine trees. I said, oh yeah, that's a dad joke, I suppose. But there you can see the dinosaur. You can see in the background, you can see the layers of rock, and that's where it's in these layers of rock where they find dinosaurs all over the place. And I went to a museum which was there, the Royal Tyrrell Museum, and had a look at a lot of the dinosaurs that they'd found in that area. And this is one of them. This is can you see what that is? It's called Triceratops horridus. Anybody here want to be a paleontologist? You can think up names like that. Triceratops horridus. Triceratops means 3 horns, of course. And it's quite a large animal, as big as a hippopotamus it would be. It hasn't eaten very much lately. And but one of the interesting things about it, it had a sign on it. Well, when it was dug up, they dug it up in that area. That's where they found it. They did not have this attached to it. It did not have a label on it which said 68 million years old. That's what was in the museum. There was that's what it said, Triceratops horridus, 68 million years old. And that sort of creates, it's interesting that this is all through our culture, not just in Canada, but also in Australia. It's also in the United States. It's also in the UK. It's also in New Zealand. All across the West is this idea of millions and millions of years. And a lot of people say, well, does it really matter whether, there's a lady in my church says, I don't think it matters if God created in 6 days or if it took millions of years. What's the point? Is it really important? And it's interesting to answer that one. One of my colleagues was at a theological college, and he was talking to one of the lecturers, one of the professors there. And when he was talking to the professor said the same thing in the theological college. I don't think it really matters. As long as God created, that's the important thing. And my colleague has a piece of card in which he has a picture on it, and it's laminated. He did this specially, and he pulled out this card to show to this professor at this theological college. And he showed them this card here. Here it is here. Click on, click back. There we go. This picture here of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And he said to the professor, well, this is a little picture. This is not a photograph. It's an artist's impression of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And you can see that it's all very nice, isn't it? You got the geese, they're really nice. You got the pretty flowers, the birds flying around, the elephants look very happy. And here they are in the Garden of Eden. And remember, God created them right at the beginning. On the sixth day of creation, God said, let us make man in our image. And he created male and female. He created them. And so does it really matter whether God took millions of years or whether he did it in 6 days? Well, if he did it in millions of years, then you would have all that time before Adam and Eve. The Bible says Adam and Eve were at the beginning, doesn't it? At the beginning of creation. And if you put all that time before Adam and Eve, then what you end up with is you find that Adam and Eve are sitting on all these layers of rock underneath, which are full of all these strata, which are full of all these fossils. And that doesn't really look very good, does it? You know, because remember, God looked at all that he'd made at the beginning and he said, it is very good. And Eve said, oh, this is a perfect world. Yes, Eve, just like God said. So that's a problem, don't you think? You've got here death, suffering, and disease demonstrated in all these fossils. And yet God looked at what he'd made and he said it was very good. Now, that professor at the theological college, his mouth just about dropped to the table as he suddenly realized he'd never connected fossils and millions of years with death and suffering and disease. Because the Bible tells us where death and suffering, disease came from. And he didn't have an answer for that. And a lot of people don't have an answer for this. They've not really thought it through. And we're going to talk about things like that tonight, rocks and fossils. And we read in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 16, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. Prepared means what? Ahead of time, doesn't it? Ahead of time, you're prepared. And so what is the answer to that? All these layers of rock, all these layers of fossils, where do they fit? Well, they don't fit before Adam and Eve, the fossil record with death, suffering and disease. It couldn't have been before sin came into the world and death through sin, but it had to be after. What could have caused all these fossils after Adam and Eve? Does the Bible say anything about that? Yes, it does. It talks about a global flood where the whole world was deluged and destroyed. And so that's the key to being able to understand how this all fits together. I wonder if there are any parents here who have got children who are learning to drive a motor car. Has anybody got kids learning to drive a motor car? I got a few grandkids learning, and their parents are just about pulling their hair out of their heads. Because in Queensland, you have to get 100 hours of driving. And you might sort of take the kids out for a drive, and they drive and you get 15 minutes, or you get half an hour or something like that. Takes a lot to get up to 100 hours. And so it's this sign here, there's Noah's flood. That's what it was. You got this sign here, L for learner. And because we recognise that we just can't let young people, new people who've not driven before on the roads without having, been taught how to do it, without having practice about the traffic and the gears and all the things that work are necessary. So they need to learn to face different situations, always need to be prepared. But what's happening at schools today in our culture and what's happening at universities is actually more dangerous for children than it is driving a motor car, because it's danger to their whole faith and their whole future. And there's been some surveys which have been done. Here's one by Barna, the State of the Church, 2002. It's about the same or a bit different, a bit worse today. And this survey, a Christian pollster, revealed that up to 70% of Christian young people, they brought up in a Christian home and in the church, walk away from the faith after they get to high school, up to upper high school and university. 70%. I don't know, do you know of anybody like that was involved in the church, that grew up in the church and has walked away from it? It certainly is a risk and something that needs to be avoided. And I think we've got a book up on the tables, here the tables behind me, called the Creation Survival Guide, How to Graduate with Your Faith in Fact. So in other words, we need to prepare our young people not to drive and face the risks that are on the road, but to be able to navigate the risks that are through the education system, which is very much a sort of a naturalistic, you could say an anti-biblical, certainly doesn't think the Bible's true point of view. And so when we look in at evidence, that's the big thing, evidence. And at the schools and universities they talk about, we look at evidence. We're not like people in church, that just work on faith and feelings and that sort of thing. We want to see evidence. Well, there's an example of evidence. I showed you an example of evidence with the Triceratops horridus. What was that? Evidence? That was evidence, wasn't it? And the date, 68 million years? No, that wasn't evidence. That was somebody's opinion that was put on there. And it's like that here. Here's some dinosaurs again. Dinosaurs are a great way to understand about creation and the Bible and the truth of the Bible. So here's this guy. One guy's looking at the evidence through these glasses. That's a good way of saying that the way they think, their worldview, what they're already in their head, what they've picked up as kids and during their education, that is the way they look at the world. And so you can look at it through the lens of evolution, that evidence. Or you could look at it through the lens of the Bible. And some people say, well, who's got the most evidence? Do creationists have more evidence than evolutionists? Or do evolutionists have more evidence than creationists? Who's got the more evidence? Well, we've all got exactly the same amount of evidence. It's all the same evidence. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing to realise that? It's the same evidence. It's the same rocks. It's the same fossils, the same dinosaur bones. It's the same animals. It's the same plants. It's the same stars. It's all the same evidence. Well, what's different? The way you look at the evidence. Now, we all know how to look at the evidence through an evolution worldview because that's the way it's been presented to us all our lives. And many of us have learned how to look at it through the other way, using the Bible as a way of understanding the world. But a lot of people haven't learnt that. But tonight, that's what we're going to do. We're going to learn today how to look through Bible glasses, and this is going to have a big impact. Once you learn how to look at it in this particular way, from a different way from what we've been brought up to, it makes a big difference. So what will this do? What will this do for you? Well, the first thing is, it will warn you of the risks to you and your family. There are risks at looking at the way you look at the world will have effects on you. It will show you why creation is indeed factual and that it can be believed. You can accept it. It's not something that you think is necessarily something it's ridiculous. It will give you confidence in the Word of God that you can trust. Here's a Bible. Gideon Bible, you can trust what you read in there, that it's actually factual. And it will also, tonight, it will reveal to you ways in which you can be prepared. And that's the idea tonight. It's not just about listening and thinking, well, that was interesting, that was a new idea, I like that. It's about saying it's a call to action so that you can be prepared. And so we showed that picture of the fossils which are underneath Adam and Eve. And we put a label over the top of it which said, Noah's flood. This is the evidence of Noah's flood. So where would you find out any information about Noah's flood? Where would you find that out? Do we have any parchments which have been found? Where would you find out information about Noah's flood? Anybody got any idea? I beg your pardon? The Bible. Yeah, the Bible is basically, it's really the major document in the world, in existence in the world today, that describes the events of Noah's flood. And so we go to the Bible. It's Genesis chapter 1 is creation, and Genesis chapter 2 is creation, and it's Genesis chapter 3 is the fall, and then Genesis chapter 6, 7, and 8 is the Bible, where you find out it's 3 chapters and there's a lot of detail and you can read it. I mean, it doesn't record everything. It's a little bit, just 3 chapters, but it's got enough there for us to be able to understand it. And there's a guy that lived in Holland. in the Netherlands. He was a building contractor. And he had a passion. It was a dream of his. You know what he wanted to build? Something like that guy over there. He wanted to build a replica of Noah's Ark, which is a big ambition, because when you think about how big Noah's Ark was, it was an enormous boat, what's described in the Bible. And this is him here, Johann Hubers. And we did an article about him in Creation magazine quite a number of years ago. And so he built this replica. It's not really a replica. It's sort of, you can see that it's Noah's Ark. Can you see that? It's sort of got that classic shape, and it's got the building on the top. So it's you can see it's Noah's Ark, and it's about the right size because it's about 140 meters long, which is longer than a football field. And so he built this thing just to catch people's attention that this was Noah's Ark. And it's not exactly a replica, but it's pretty good. And here it is. A friend of mine he and his wife went to Holland, and they found this thing. It was amazing that it was parked on a pier. And here it is here, and people are going along the road looking at this enormous boat. And people look at it, you know what they say? I didn't know it was so big. I never realized it was so big. It's huge. It's monstrous. It was higher than a four-story building. It had 3 decks, a bottom deck, a second deck, a third deck, and it was this enormous size. It was incredibly stable. And, this is in Holland. And yet Holland is sort of renowned for, in its history, of being part of the Reformation. Are you aware of that? There was a great Christian movement in many of the countries of Europe, in England, in Germany, and in Holland was particularly famous. And a lot of people came to the Lord, started following the Lord. There were lots of churches in Holland, but over the years, these people have abandoned the faith. Just like that university picture that I showed you, where 70% of young people abandon the faith. That's what happened in Holland. And it's an incredibly secular country now. Lots of problems, drug issues and all things like that in Holland, because people have gone away. They no longer believe the Bible and the things that they were taught at their homes and in their churches. And at the beginning of the year 1900, going back over 100 years, the Christians in Holland, 95% of the population of Holland was Christian. They went to church, similar to Australia, but in Holland it was 95%. And there was only 5% who were non-religious or atheists, only a really small number. But today, 100 years later, there's something like only from 95 down to 40% of people now identify as being Christian. What a change that has been in that country. And it's similar in Australia. Did you know that? And the number of atheists in Holland has risen to, non-religious and atheists, has risen to 55% of these people in Holland. And so here's this guy. He built this ark. That's a bit about the ark. 15,000 tons. It's quite big, isn't it? Incredibly stable. The dimensions are very stable. The Bible tells us that. And so here he is. He is sailing it down one of the canals. Now, this is one of the earlier arks that he made. It's not quite the full size, because it was, he had to fit it down the canal. It could only be a certain size. And also he's working up to it, doing it in little steps. And so it's going down the canal. Can you just see, look at the people that are out looking at it. They're saying the same thing. I never realized it was so big. The bridges come up so that it can get through. You had animals on it. You've got the giraffe on it, just on here. And you could go on, you could have a cup of coffee and that sort of thing, which is really, really good. And you know what happened? A lot of these people, they went home and they dug out the old family Bible, something which had been around for 100 years. And they found it in the cupboard. They dug it out. It was all in Old English or Old Dutch or whatever. And they opened it up and they read the story of Noah's Ark. And they could see that what they saw on the canal was what the Bible said. See, it prompted it reminded them of their heritage. And many of them read on and started to realize that what the Word of God said was true. And so that's why we talk about Noah's flood. So you might be sort of thinking about, well, how can I come up to speed with all this stuff? I don't know very much about geology, I don't know much about biology and all that sort of stuff. I don't know a lot about what the Bible says. Well, one really good way is Creation Ministries particularly helps in this way, is we provide a free email service for people. And it's called the newsletter, Creation Newsletter, that comes out. And I'm just going to give you an opportunity or talk to you now about how you can get connected, if you'd like to be connected and if you'd like to come up to speed and be prepared. Now, did somebody give you these these bookmarks that are there? And do you know what they are? They're bookmarks. There you go, they're bookmarks. And on the back, there's various ways in which you can connect through this newsletter. This is a newsletter which comes out a couple of times, about once every couple of weeks, and it's got a digest of stuff that's on the, that's in the news. It's relevant to creation, relevant to the Bible, relevant to science and that, and it comes out. And so you can just flick through it and say, oh, that one looks interesting, and go and have a look at it. And so to get connected, how many are already connected to the email newsletter? There's a lot of people are, but some people are not. Some people aren't. So the way you can do it, on the bottom of your bookmark, there is a little QR code, and you can click on that. You could do it now if you wanted to. You can click on that and you can connect up. If you want help to do it, you can do it when you see people here and they will click up with you here. Is that right? We won't pass those around. Yeah, but you can do it here. Or could you hold one of them up? Could you just hold one of them up? Or you can, no, not those, the other ones, just hold one up. Or you can sign on through this thing. There's various ways. I mean, different people have got different ways that they like to do to connect. And so to make it easy for you, you can sign on with one of those. Where are people going to come to be attended? Here. And this lovely lady and this lovely gentleman and this fine-looking man will be able to help you with your signing on and that sort of thing. There's a lady called Gemma. She signed on to this thing a number of years ago. She was teaching religious education in the school. And she was, like a lot of RE teachers, she was an older lady. And she hadn't grown up with things like dinosaurs and all that, like young people do today. And she said when she received this email, it was sort of like an education system for her. It was like a training program for her. And she found that she could actually answer the questions that the kids were asking in her class. And so that's the email newsletter. So I don't know if...
No, that's free.
It's free, that's right. It's free. And it's it's for you. That's the idea, is it's free and it's for you.
The invitation is to go on now, on your mobile phone, log on that QR code, put your email address in, and then you'll have logged in to get it.
Okay.
You can do it while you're sitting down here now.
That's right. And so while you're doing that, I'll just mention the next thing, which is also free, which is the website, which is creation.com. And so you might sort of think, well, I don't know where I can get answers from. Be prepared. And this, if you know the address, creation.com, you're prepared. You're prepared. And it's not hard to remember that. It's creation.com and you're prepared. And you can go there, do a search, and you find out things about all sorts of things, about geology, about Cain and Abel, and about the Noah's Ark and all sorts of things. Now, one of the questions that can rattle people is, it happened when I was working with the electricity industry. I used to try to talk to my engineering colleagues about this sort of stuff, and they were very sceptical. Do you know of any sceptical people in your life that's hard to talk to? Sometimes it's really hard to talk to them. And this guy said, well, where did all the water come from for Noah's? How did the water cover the highest mountains in the world? You know, and basically it's ridiculous to think about Noah's flood. And the way the conversation goes, sometimes it's hard to get an answer in and you have to listen. But, well, it's actually very simple. Today, in geology, geologists know how it is possible, because they understand that the world the whole crust of the earth is broken up into pieces, and they call them tectonic plates, and these plates can move. And it's a little bit like this. So here's just a cartoon of part of the Earth, right? And you've got the continent rising up there. Can you see that? That's up high, like, Melbourne sitting up above the ocean, which is down there. And so you've got the ocean and you've got the continent up high, and this would have been what it was like before the flood. And then all you need to create the flood is, what do you need to do? Well, all you need to do is to push the ocean basins up. Will that be easy to do? Well, I couldn't do it, but you can imagine it, can't you? And push the continents down. And so when you do that, if you did that today, and that happened, then what would happen is the continents would go down, and there's enough water on the oceans today, in the oceans now, to cover the Earth, the whole Earth, to a depth of some 3 kilometres. So you can see it's certainly quite feasible, quite logical to think how Noah's flood covered the whole Earth. And so the evidence that we see around the world is what you'd expect from the flood. What would you expect? There's a song, I don't know if you've heard that song. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers, laid down by water all over the Earth. And what do you find? Billions of dead things called fossils, laid down by water in sedimentary rocks all over the Earth. And here's one example. I'll just give you one. This is an ichthyosaur from a quarry in Europe, a limestone quarry. And you can see it's about 2 metres long. Is that about 2 metres long? That's probably not quite 2 metres. And you can see how well preserved it is. Isn't that an incredible fossil? And one of the things you might not notice about it is that it's a female ichthyosaur. And the way you tell that is you can tell by the lipstick that it's wearing. Can you see that? No, that was a joke. It's supposed to be a joke. You can tell it's a female ichthyosaur because it's giving birth. Can you see that it's giving birth to a baby ichthyosaur? There it is there. And I've heard of some very difficult births in my time. One of my daughters had a very difficult birth. But I can't imagine a birth taking thousands of years waiting to be covered up with sediment, can you? That's snap frozen in time. And so there's an example of Noah's flood. And the evidence that you'd expect from Noah's flood, these fossils, millions of dead things, billions of dead things laid down by water all over the Earth. Now, where was that place that I went to? That's right, Drumheller. Do you remember I talked about Drumheller? So Drumheller, where's Drumheller? Drumheller's up here, right, in Canada. And it's Alberta, and that's where the Drumheller is. It's also where the museum is that I went to. And the geologists recognise that the continents were covered in water. Can you see the water that they've drawn there? So geologists recognise that the water was much higher than in the past than it is today. And they call it an eperic sea. It's a complicated term, but it just means a great inland sea. Have you heard of that term? The Great Inland Sea. It's a great inland sea. Now, it doesn't cover the whole continent. That's because things have happened which have washed the evidence away. But you can see there's still a lot of evidence that's still there that the area was covered in water. And particularly and lots of dinosaurs were buried in that water, by that water. And this is the museum that we went to, the Royal Tyrrell Museum. Royal means it's reliable, doesn't it? It's very famous and grand. Royal Tyrrell Museum. And it's in Canada, not in the USA, so Canada is connected with the British Commonwealth, it was. And so we went to have a look and see the dinosaurs there. That's a sort of big feature of the museum. And, and here's that dinosaur I showed you before, the Triceratops horridus. Now, see how big it is? It's quite a big dinosaur. Now, if you're going to bury a dinosaur to create a fossil, I mean, if a cow dies on the side of the road, or a kangaroo, does it lie there for thousands of years waiting to be buried? Doesn't, does it? It gets eaten by dingoes and lots of other things and crows, and within 6 months there's hardly anything left. And same with this, it has to be buried quickly. And if you're going to bury such a large animal, would you need a little bit of sediment or a lot of sediment? You'd need a lot of sediment. As a matter of fact, they say you need to cover it by about 1 metre or 2 of sediment. Otherwise, put your fingers in your ears, boys and girls, it all bloats up with gas. It all bloats up with gas and it pops out from under the sediment. And so it would be eaten again. So it has to be a lot of sediment to bury this animal. And so that's Triceratops horridus. But there were a lot of big animals that happened. And here's another one. Look at that. Look at the size of the foot on that one. Can you see that? That's the front leg of a dinosaur, buried in Noah's flood. Because that's the way, when we look at it through a Bible lens, we understand that would have been buried in Noah's flood because that's what provides the amount of water that you need to do it and the amount of sediment that you need. And just have a look at this. You watch this. Just watch it. See how tall it is? Goes up to 11 foot long at the front leg. That would be a big dinosaur. And it was one that did not get on the ark. I mean, they would have taken young dinosaurs on the ark, right? Because you want to have more dinosaurs and have families after the flood. You don't want great-grandma and great-grandpa on the flood, on the ark, because you need to preserve them. Now, there's I was looking through the web when I went at the Royal Tyrrell Museum. I was looking through the internet, and I found this article by Live Science about some dinosaurs that had been discovered by the scientists in the Royal Tyrrell Museum, right? And this is from Live Science. This is a picture there of these. They're centrosaurs, and I'll just put up the sign of what it says on this website. It said about them. It says, a herd of centrosaurs, a type of horned dinosaur, drowning in a flood millions of years ago in what is now Alberta, as depicted in this illustration. So they've found these dinosaurs buried in Alberta. And they said here, they left behind what could be the world's largest dinosaur graveyard. A lot of them got buried all at once. Would that mean a little bit of water or a lot of water? What does it say? It's drowning in a flood. And they got a little picture of a little lake there where they can fall over and drown in the lake, right? A flood, notice millions of years ago, that's the way everything's presented. People read it and they just sort of absorb it, but they don't think, that doesn't make sense. How could that happen? How could you get the largest dinosaur graveyard in a flood? We have floods today. You don't have huge graveyards of cows and things, do you? And so you change a couple of words. You watch this. This is how you swap from an evolution way of looking at things to a Bible way of looking at things. And it's not complicated. This is the thing. It's easy to do. It's really easy to do. So just watch here. Drowning in Noah's flood 4,500 years ago. Do you see how that works? Don't you think that's good? And basically, it's all pretty well accurate, except for the picture. The picture's not bad. But so there you go. But so you see, the information's presented in this way. The scientists discover the evidence of Noah's flood, but they don't see it. They don't see it because they're imagining millions of years, not realising all the inconsistencies that they have with that sort of belief. And here's another example of some amazing evidence, which is up the road at Sydney. You've got the Three Sisters there. Who's been to the Three Sisters? Anybody been there? Yes, that's a really nice place, isn't it? And when you look at it, have you ever wondered, you might have wondered this, have you ever wondered or noticed how flat the surface is? It's called a plateau. Did you notice that? Ever wondered how it got to be so flat? You know, geologists, people who study the landforms, they think of it as, they call it geomorphology, geology shape, the shape of the land. And there's I'll show you the book in a minute about that. But how did it get to be so flat? How did it get to be so flat? Well, the Bible explains that because it talks about how the waters of Noah's flood rose and they continued to rise until every high mountain under the entire heavens were covered. And so that would have included this, wouldn't it? Every mountain would have included Australia. It would have been higher than Mount Kosciuszko. And Mount Kosciuszko is not that high compared to the mountains around the Middle East. And so the water would have been over the whole surface, and when it's covering the whole lot, it makes it flat. Can you see that? Isn't that easy? I was in a meeting once, and a lady said, "I've never thought about that before." She said it out really loud. It was so funny. She never thought about it before. And you can see the evidence, and it's not just here. You can see it everywhere. But there's something else. There's something else about this. Notice this, that the river that's going down there is going in this valley, which is very, very large compared to the river. Now, geologists notice this. They notice that the river, they call it an underfit river. It's too small for the valley. And I don't call it an underfit river. I call it an overfit valley, because the valley was not carved by the river. The valley was carved by a lot more water in the past. And we read there in Genesis chapter 8 about how Noah was in the ark, Noah's ark, and the ark had come to rest on the mountains of Ararat, and he was waiting to see when the earth would be dry. And they looked out, and he was 2.5 months in the ark, and then some mountains became visible above the water. See, the water's going down, the mountains became visible. And so that's when these plateaux came above the water then would have gone down this big channel. And as the water continued to flow out, it carved this great big wide channel. And so that's just another amazing evidence of Noah's flood. You see that everywhere. And there's a book about it, just to mention something. Hopefully, here it goes. There's a book, How Noah's Flood Shaped our Earth. There's so many different things in our Earth which are characteristic, caused by Noah's flood, which is very amazing. Now, one of the interesting things is that we generally think that things take millions of years to form, and that's what throws us off the trail. And you hear millions of years this, millions of years that. And you look at this, for example, this canyon. It's given a name. It's not enormous, but it's reasonably large. It's called Little Grand Canyon. It's a 40th the scale of Grand Canyon. And the walls are about 30 metres high, and it's about 50 metres across, right? And you got this little creek going down the middle of the canyon. And you would think that it would take a long time for that creek to carve that canyon. That's the sort of logical way you'd sort of look at it, because you're thinking what we're seeing now is what's always been happening. But it's not like that, because this canyon was not carved by that creek. This canyon was carved by an enormous mud flow, great volume of mud. There was a volcano, Mount St. Helens, which exploded, and it melted the snow and ice, and it came sliding down the side of the mountain, and it carved this canyon in about one day. That's all, one day. Isn't that incredible? And so this is Mount St. Helens here, and it was a gigantic eruption in 1980, and it blew the top off the mountain. There were over 50 people killed during that explosion. It happened on a Sunday morning. Most people were in church and not at work because it was a Sunday, and so most people survived. If it had been on a normal weekday, there would have been thousands of people die as a result of this explosion. And you can see the top's been blown off. That's something like what it used to look like, a very sort of traditional volcanic shape. And you can see how the various mud flows have carved these gorges down the side, and we saw that one little Grand Canyon. So Mount St. Helens is on the western side, which is that's to you, it's that side, the western side of the United States, up towards the Canadian border, and the Earth's here's a map of the Earth. Where is it? Map of the Earth is here, and you can see there's the Mount St. Helens is about there, right, in North America, in the USA, and the crust of the Earth is broken into these plates. like something's gone wrong and things have been broken, like an egg, an eggshell. You can break it and it's all cracked, but it's still egg-shaped. And so these various plates, you've got the Pacific plate here, you've got the North American plate there, there's Australia over there we've got our own plate, the Australian plate, right? That's where it is there. And the North American plate is moving that way, and the Pacific plate is moving that way, and they're pushing together, right? And so that's the idea of plate tectonics, is the plates move, and there's various ways they move, but we won't go into all that. But what happens, there it is there. And so this is like a little cartoon of Mount St Helens area. So you've got the Mount St Helens there. You've got the Pacific plate coming here, and it's pushing sideways down here, and it's going down into the earth, right? It's called a subduction zone. It's going down. And then this part of the continent is sitting here, and it's going that way. It's pushing together. And the idea is that as it's pushing together, it's creating heat as it's going down. This is a story that's there. And so it's melting, the rock is melting, and it's coming up and producing this volcano. Right? And so that's the idea of Mount St Helens. It's a rock that's melting and that's coming up from this, where the continent's pushing together. Now, it's been discovered that the Pacific plate's moving about something like 6 centimetres a year. That's what the story is. I don't know if people are 100% sure of that amount, but so when they do it 6 centimetres per year, you can work out, like, for example, the width of the oceans, and the continents have been moving apart. So, for example, we're going to click. Let's click. I think Bogdan's able to push the button and make it click. Can you make it click? Hey? There we go. So the idea was, if you go backwards in time, that the continents were all together. Have you heard of that? It's called Pangea. Pan means everything, Gea means earth. All of the earth's together. So that's the idea, that it was once together. And there's a bit more of a story to it than this, but this is the way it was. And this is supposedly 200 million years ago. And that's the idea. So 6 centimetres per year, 200 million years, and it's creeping apart. And so that, press again, 100 million years. There we go again. For some reason, can you just press the space bar and make it go? There you go, 100 million years. And so here we go, Australia's zooming up the side there. And there you got Africa there, you got India making a bit of a break there, and it's going up towards Asia, and eventually it pushes into Asia and creates the Mount Everest and that. So that's the idea of the continents moving. But there's a number of creationist geologists sort of look at this, and they've sort of come to the conclusion that the movement that we see now is just the last little bit of movement of a major catastrophe in the past. And the major catastrophe was Noah's flood, and the whole continents broke up at that time. And so, if you can push it again, that would be nice. So you can go to the website. Do you know what the name of the website is? Creation.com. And you look for this thing. It's called the Geology Transformation Tool, right? And you look in there and you look at 100, and you just look at it. It looks complicated. It's not complicated. You just have to look for the words. And it's got the dates here, which the geologists talk about. You just look for the number. And 200 million years. Oh, here it is, 200 million years. And it's got here, floodwaters rising. Right? So 200, this is as the floodwaters are rising. 200 million, 100 million, oh, they're still rising. Right? So this is as the floodwaters were rising. And you can work out when different things happen. I just want to poke that into you, just to let you see. And you can click it again, that would be great. This is the breakup of Pangea. It occurred during the flood, as the floodwaters are coming to the top. And the Bible says that as the water started to go down, the continents are starting to break up, the oceans are starting to go down. Noah's sitting in the ark waiting for the water to go off, and it's all happening at that time. And Egypt was being formed after the flood. Yes, that's the church. What do we got here? Okay, thanks so much, Bogdan. That's great. So how did that happen? We've got, for some reason, it's not really clicking well. Break a Pangea. Can you just push the buttons for me? And do it again. So how did it work? Well, you just do the same thing backwards. Put it once more. So you got the water, the ocean basins going down, and another one, and the continents going up. And when that happens, click. You've got the continents going up, the water's coming off the continents into the oceans. And so that's where all the water, that's where all the water's gone. People say, where did all the water go to? Well, go down. You can go down to Phillip Island and have a look at the ocean. It's all in the ocean. And so and also what happened was, I push again, as that happened, you get cracking in the various plates as the plates move, and you end up with the plate arrangements that we see today. Just push it once again, and this has got a diagram of the earthquakes, the major earthquakes which occur in the world, and you can see the pattern of the earthquakes around the world, and they follow on the patterns of those plates. And so that's just a very, very small little information about the continental drift and plate tectonics. And there's a lot of discussion about it on creation.com, and you can easily find it there. And this is just one article about it. Data supporting seafloor spreading and catastrophic plate tectonics, and push it again. It just goes on, the article. And so you could find out more about it there. So I want to go, we've been talking about rocks, fossils, and now we're going to get onto the age of the earth. And, I used to, like those friends of mine, I used to think the age of the earth was not that important. But now I realise that it's a very, very important thing, as we talked about before. But, it's a gospel issue, and so it's important to be confident of it, to realise, not to be saying, well, I'm not sure if it is or it isn't, I'm not sure how it works. It sort of seems very convincing, but sometimes I've got doubts. You don't want to be like that. And so here's an example. They say, it's really easy to measure the age of the earth. It's just like an hourglass. It's so easy to do. You've got this isotope, this element of potassium. It's starting and it's changing into argon, and you just measure what's up there and you measure what's down there, and there you got it, the age of the earth. No, it's not like that at all, because you don't know the starting amount. If you don't know the starting amount, you don't know how long it's been going for. And that's really probably the basic issue, is we can't go back in time to see what was there when it started. And so the one, you don't know if any's been gained there or lost. The next one, gained there, has any been gained or lost? And we don't know if the rate's been the same all the way through. So you see, there's a lot of assumptions go into it. And so let's just flick on a couple more. I think we'll go through, keep going through this. We'll skip through this. Keep going. More. There we go. Stop. This is a summary page on the website, and it's about how dating methods work. And it's a summary for you so that you don't have to go through all the detail, but you can go there and look at it. So the next button says, there's no instrument that can measure the age. Can somebody tell me why there is no instrument that can measure the age? Can anybody tell me why? Anybody come up with a suggestion why? Yes? That's very good. What's your name? Eve? Eve said, maybe because nobody knows what happened back in the beginning of time. And that's exactly right. How old are you, Eve? 8? She gets it. So many people, grown-up people, don't get it. Is that you can make amazing measurements now in the present. You've got these amazing machines that measure it, but you can't. It's not an age. You've got to know what it was back in time at the beginning, and we can't go back and make the measurements. And so that's the thing. First thing, no instrument can measure age. So what do? we make an assumption. We have to make an assumption of what it was back there. So that's a guess. And the next one is you can get any age you like, depending on the guess you make. Did you know that? Most people don't realise that, but it's based on very wise, very methodical, very logical, very consistent guesses. You can get any age you like. And the next one is if the date is no good, if geologists don't accept a date, an age, if it doesn't agree with what they think it's going to be. And so there's a lot of this after the event sort of thinking about it that goes on. And when you sort of sort it all out, it all looks very good. But when you dig in, you realise it's just based on assumptions. So how can we measure the age of something in the past? How can we know how old something is? Now, Eve, you said you were 8. So how do you know that you were 8? The year that you were born. So how do you know what year you were born in? I'm sorry, you're very good. I don't want to embarrass you too much, but how do you know what year you were born in? Did your mother tell you? I had one boy that I asked this and he says, it's written on the calendar. I said, well, how do you know what's on the calendar was right? Daddy told me. How does Daddy know? Mummy was there, you know. And that's based on eyewitnesses. Can you press the button? The only sure way, again, is eyewitnesses. Your mother was there, the doctor was there, and a written record, which is a birth certificate. That's how we know. It's a history. And you push the button, and we got the birth certificate there. So let's move on again to the next picture. Is like we know, First Fleet in Australia, 1788. How do we know that? Because people were there. It's based on eyewitnesses. People, they wrote it down, probably wrote letters home, put it in their logs and that. And so the next button shows how we know from Adam. This is Adam up there. There's a little diagram. That's not really Adam. That's just a picture of a cartoon of him. And it goes father, son to Noah, all the way to Abraham, all the way down to King David. We've all heard of these. They're real people. And all the way coming through to Christ, one way through Joseph, another way through Mary. And we know how old the father was when the son was born, and we can figure it out. And the Bible records this in amazing detail. We can figure it out, and we can figure out that creation occurred about 4,000 years before Jesus was born. Isn't that incredible? And so we know we can rely on that's based on the only logical, reliable, actual way of knowing what things happened in the past. So press for the next button is coming back to this verse. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reasons for the faith you have. Always be prepared to give an answer. And when you start out, sometimes we're not prepared. And we do have to sort things out. We do have to get answers to our questions. There's a guy called Kenneth. He wrote an email to us and he said, I was raised in the church up until my teens. And before I rejected it and declared myself an atheist agnostic. He said, the creation evolution issue was the number one sticking point for me. And he said, how can you believe the Bible if it's wrong from the very beginning? And I think a lot of young people think that about it. And other young people said, your writings played a very big part in me becoming a Christian. He said, my brother got me a subscription to Creation magazine, which is this magazine. So the Creation magazine, does anybody get the magazine? I think quite a few people do. Is it any good? Do you like it? It's a good magazine. I get it. I think it's a good magazine. So the thing is, this is a magazine. Like if you have it in your home, it's something that people pick up and read, your children, your relatives when they come to your home, and people will get hold of this and read it. And it's got articles that sort of answer these questions. Here's one about geological field trips, which is something of interest to me. There's stuff about biology and that, about animals. And so it's very interesting. There's a guy that wrote to us or was on Facebook, and he said, I've been reading creation stuff for years. He says, it's a lot of fun. He says, I actually find that I'm acing year 12 biology. So what do you think about that? Reading Creation magazine with pretty pictures in it, and he's acing biology. How does that happen? He said, specifically, he says evolution. I'm acing evolution. He says, I seem to know more about it than my teachers. And you know why that is? It's because they don't teach it properly at university. It's because they're pushing an agenda and they muddy the waters. And so the kids sort of come out of there. They know what they've been told, but they don't really understand how it works. And that's what Creation magazine does. So if you'd like to get it, well, I'd encourage you, if you don't get it, tonight's the night to get it. And one guy wrote to us and he says, I was converted when somebody gave me a copy to Creation magazine. And he said, I subscribed for my brothers and my siblings, and 4 out of the 5 have become Christians since reading Creation magazine. And so that's why I love it. That's why I get it for my kids. They should buy their own, but I get it for them. And so you can do that tonight. If you push the button, it's got a picture here. Now, the other thing about tonight, there's something else about tonight about it, but this is the form you fill out for Creation magazine. So in order to receive it into your home, it comes out every 3 months. So it's sort of a renewed rejuvenation of the whole issue every 3 months in your home when the magazine gets delivered to you. And it's, as you can see, it's fully covered. So if you can tick up there 1 year or 3 years. If you get 1 year and 3 years, both of them, you get a free back issue tonight. They'll give you one. You've got free copies of this. So you get a free back issue tonight. And but for a 3 year, this is what, sort of just for tonight, is there's a voucher down the bottom there. It's for $15 so that you can get a magazine, back magazine, you get a 3-year subscription, plus you can get $15 off of books for free tonight. And so I would like to hand these around, but I don't have them. So just to come to the table, and they've got these laid out for you. You just sign up and you'll be able to get them. And you might be sort of thinking, well, it's been interesting, but is there something that's sort of compact that I don't have to think about so much? Just something that covers all the major issues. Well, there is. That's in the next one here, this picture, creation.com. Next one is, don't forget that, but next one is, this is the one that covers all the issues, the Answers book. And maybe some of you have got the Answers book. This is the one, if you want something compact, you can get it through this. Or the next one is something, if you want something more in-depth, this is Evolution's Weak Points, Achilles' Heels. And then if you're interested in geology, we've talked about rocks and fossils. There's a really great book for kids, but also it's really for anybody, Exploring Geology with Mr. Hibb. And there's another one which has just come out called Biblical Geology 101. How do you start with the Bible? How can you work out geology using the Bible? And it's very simple. It's very simple, and it just explains it in this book. Now, you might sort of also think, well, I'd like to get something that's a bit of a reference thing, to refer to, which is reliable. And the next one is that it's called the Genesis account. It's a commentary. It's a scientific and theological commentary on Genesis 1 to 11. So I hope what this has done, this presentation, I hope that if you have a look at this next one, we'll flick through it. I hope what it's done for you is that it's sort of been a little bit of a warning about the sort of risks we and our families are facing in this culture. You know, there are physical risks. There's all sorts of, political risks. But it's a bigger risk. It's to do with our eternal salvation, our relationship with our Creator. And hopefully I've got enough evidence up there, not much, but enough to sort of say, yeah, it sounds like it could be true if you've had doubts when you're coming. And the next one, I hope it'll help to give you confidence in the Word of God, that you can believe it from the very beginning. And the next one will show that I've tried to give you ways of being prepared. I'm quite aware that when I come here, it was very nice that Chris just gave me, I don't know how much he gave me, about an hour, did you? That was the idea, an hour. And so I tried to sort of squeeze as much in as I can. But my main goal has been to sort of say, point you to where you can get more information. I tried to sort of indicate, hey, I need to get informed. I need to come up to speed with this. This is an important issue. And I hope that's been a good way for you. So I just want to finish with, why to start with the Bible? And there's this picture here, this story. Your word is a lamp to my feet. God's word is like a lamp that shows us the way in our personal lives and in so many different things, in our marriages, with our children, with our relationships with people, governments. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. So I pray that it's been a blessing to you tonight. Thank you very much, Reverend Chris, for the privilege of sharing with you tonight. Yeah, anytime.
More messages of hope at essendonpresbyterianchurch.org.au or wherever you get your podcasts from.